Mother Bear refused to leave the baby's incubator side. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The night was unusually quiet at Pine Valley Medical Center. Rain tapped softly against the windows of the neonatal intensive care unit, creating a rhythmic pattern that seemed to match the steady beeping of monitors. Nurse Clara Martinez walked down the dimly lit hallway, her soft-soled shoes making barely a whisper on the polished floor. She had been working the night shift for 8 years, but tonight felt different somehow. In room 204, tiny Lily Chen lay in her incubator, fighting for every breath. Born 3 months premature, the baby weighed barely 2 pounds. Her parents, David and Maria Chen, had gone home for a few hours of much-needed rest after spending 3 straight days at the hospital. The doctors had warned them that the next 48 hours would be critical. Clara checked the monitors surrounding Lily's incubator. The numbers weren't great, but they weren't terrible either. The baby's oxygen levels had been fluctuating all evening, and her heart rate kept dropping to concerning levels. Clara adjusted the temperature controls and made notes on her chart, whispering soft words of encouragement to the sleeping infant. "Come on, little fighter," she murmured. "Your mama and papa need you to keep fighting." As Clara turned to leave the room, a strange sound made her pause. It wasn't the usual hospital noise, not the hum of machines or the distant chatter from the nurses' station. This was something else entirely. A low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from somewhere outside the building. She walked to the window and peered out into the darkness. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars belonging to the night staff. Beyond that, Pine Valley's dense forest stretched into blackness. The sound came again, closer this time, and Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Probably just the wind, she told herself, but her hand instinctively reached for the phone at the nurse's station. That's when she saw it. A massive shadow moved across the parking lot, too large and too purposeful to be anything ordinary. Clara's breath caught in her throat as the shape came closer to the building, and she could make out the distinctive silhouette of a bear. Not just any bear. This was enormous, easily over 6 feet tall even on all fours. Clara's first instinct was to call security, but something made her hesitate. The bear wasn't acting aggressively. Instead, it moved with what seemed like purpose. It walked straight toward the medical center's main entrance, its massive head turning left and right, as if searching for something. "This can't be happening," Clara whispered to herself, grabbing the phone to call security. But before she could dial, the bear did something that made her freeze completely. It looked directly at her through the window, its dark eyes meeting hers across the distance. For a moment, that felt like eternity. Neither moved. Then the bear turned away and disappeared around the corner of the building. Clara's hands shook as she finally dialed security. "This is Clara in NICU. We have a situation. There's a bear outside the building." "A what?" came the confused voice of Jake Thompson, the night security guard. "A bear, Jake. A really big bear. It was just outside in the parking lot." "Clara, are you sure? I mean, we do get wildlife sometimes, but usually just deer or maybe a fox." "Jake, I know what I saw. This thing was huge. Can you do a perimeter check?" "Already on it. Give me 5 minutes." Clara hung up and returned to the window, but the bear was nowhere to be seen. She tried to calm her racing heart and focus on her patients, but the image of those dark, intelligent eyes wouldn't leave her mind. 20 minutes later, Jake called back. "Clara, I've checked the entire perimeter. No sign of any bear. Are you sure you didn't see a large dog, or maybe shadows from the trees?" Clara wanted to argue, but doubt was beginning to creep in. The night shift could play tricks on your mind, especially when you were tired. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe you're right, Jake. Sorry for the false alarm. But as she walked back toward Lily's room, Clara noticed something that made her blood run cold. There, on the supposedly locked door leading to the service corridor, were massive, muddy paw prints. Fresh ones. Her heart pounding, Clara followed the prints down the hallway. They led directly toward the NICU. Each print was the size of a dinner plate, with clear claw marks visible in the dried mud. Whoever had cleaned these floors earlier had done a thorough job, which meant these prints were very recent. The trail ended at the entrance to the NICU ward, where it should have been impossible for any animal to enter. The doors required keycard access, and Clara was certain she had locked them behind her. But as she approached, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. Clara's nursing training kicked in. Her first priority was the safety of her patients. She grabbed her phone and was about to call for backup when she heard it again, that low, rumbling sound. But this time, it was coming from inside the ward. Every instinct told her to run, to call security, to get as far away as possible. But Clara couldn't abandon the babies in her care, especially little Lily, who was already fighting for her life. Taking a deep breath, Clara pushed open the door to the NICU ward and stepped inside. The sight that greeted her would be burned into her memory forever. There, sitting perfectly still beside Lily's incubator, was the largest bear Clara had ever seen. Its massive frame filled the space between the medical equipment, but it sat with an almost human-like posture, as if it were a visitor waiting patiently in a hospital room. The bear's dark brown fur was matted and slightly damp from the rain outside. Scars crisscrossed its massive shoulders and face, telling stories of a hard life in the wilderness. But what struck Clara most were its eyes. They were fixed intently on the tiny baby in the incubator, and they held an expression she had never expected to see in a wild animal. Tenderness. The bear was making soft, rhythmic sounds, not growls or threatening noises, but gentle rumbles that seemed almost like a lullaby. And incredibly, impossibly, little Lily's monitors showed something Clara had never seen before in 3 days of caring for the premature infant. Her heart rate was steady. Her oxygen levels were stable. The baby looked more peaceful than she had since the day she was born. Clara stood frozen in the doorway, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. The bear seemed aware of her presence but showed no aggression. Instead, it continued its gentle vigil, occasionally lifting one massive paw as if it wanted to touch the incubator but knew better than to disturb the delicate equipment. Minutes passed like hours. Clara's mind raced through her options. She should call security. She should evacuate the ward. She should do something, anything, to protect her patients from this wild predator. But as she watched the bear's gentle behavior and saw how peacefully Lily was sleeping, Clara found herself hesitating. Something about this situation didn't feel dangerous. It felt protective. The bear turned its massive head toward Clara, and once again their eyes met. This time, Clara didn't look away. She saw intelligence in those dark eyes and something else, a desperate kind of hope that she couldn't quite understand. "What do you want?" Clara whispered, surprised by her own courage in speaking to the animal. The bear's response was a soft whuff of air, almost like a sigh. Then it turned back to the incubator, resuming its patient vigil over the tiny human who lay inside. Clara realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, something that challenged everything she thought she knew about the boundaries between the human and animal worlds. But she also knew that she couldn't handle this situation alone. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number for Dr. Sarah Kim, the head of pediatrics. It was 2:30 in the morning, but this couldn't wait until morning rounds. "Dr. Kim, this is Clara Martinez in NICU. I need you to come in right away. We have an unusual situation." As she waited for Dr. Kim to arrive, Clara remained in the doorway, watching the incredible scene unfold before her. The bear never moved from its position beside Lily's incubator, and the baby continued to show signs of improvement that seemed nothing short of miraculous. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger and more mysterious than she could possibly imagine. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours before Dr. Sarah Kim finally arrived. Clara heard the doctor's hurried footsteps echoing down the hallway, followed by hushed voices as she spoke with Jake Thompson at the security desk. Clara had remained at her post in the doorway, afraid to leave the bear alone with Lily, but equally afraid to get any closer. During those long minutes of waiting, something remarkable had happened. The bear had begun making different sounds, not the gentle rumbles from before, but what sounded almost like singing. The low, melodic tones rose and fell in a pattern that seemed deliberate, almost musical. And Lily had responded by turning her tiny head toward the sound, her breathing becoming even more regular. "Clara!" Dr. Kim's voice came from behind her, barely above a whisper. "Where exactly is this?" The words died in Dr. Kim's throat as she saw what Clara had been watching. The doctor, normally composed and unflappable even in the most critical situations, stood with her mouth open, staring at the massive bear that had somehow transformed their sterile medical environment into something that belonged more in a fairy tale. "How long has it been here?" Dr. Kim whispered. "About 40 minutes now," Clara replied softly. "And doctor, you need to see Lily's readings." Dr. Kim carefully moved to the monitoring station, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. Her eyes widened as she read the displays. "This is impossible. Her oxygen saturation is at 98%. Her heart rate is completely stable. Clara, when I left here 6 hours ago, she was barely holding on." "I know. It started almost immediately after it arrived." The bear seemed to sense their conversation and turned its massive head toward them. Dr. Kim instinctively took a step back, but the animal's expression remained calm, almost gentle. It looked at her for a long moment, then made a soft chuffing sound before returning its attention to Lily. "We need to call animal control," Dr. Kim said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "Doctor," Clara said carefully, "what if moving it hurts Lily? Look at her vitals. She's never been this stable." Dr. Kim studied the monitors again, her medical training warring with the evidence before her eyes. Everything she had learned in medical school told her that this situation was dangerous and impossible. But everything she was observing told her that somehow this wild animal was helping their tiny patient in ways they couldn't understand. "I need to call Dr. Martinez," she said finally, referring to the chief of staff. "This is beyond anything I've ever encountered." As Dr. Kim stepped outside to make her call, Clara noticed something new. The bear had shifted position slightly, and she could now see that it wasn't just sitting randomly beside the incubator. Its massive body was positioned in such a way that it was blocking the draft from the air conditioning vent that had been causing temperature fluctuations in Lily's environment all week. "Smart girl," Clara whispered, and was startled when the bear's ears twitched in response to her voice. Dr. Kim returned a few minutes later with a troubled expression. "Dr. Martinez is on his way. So is animal control and—" She paused. "So are David and Maria Chen. Someone from security called them about the situation in NICU." Clara's heart sank. "How did you tell them?" "I didn't give details. I just said there was an unusual development with Lily that they needed to see. They'll be here in 20 minutes. The next 20 minutes passed in tense silence. The bear never moved from its position, continuing its soft vocalizations that seemed to soothe not just Lily, but somehow the entire atmosphere of the room. Dr. Kim had pulled up a chair outside the room and was documenting everything she observed, muttering to herself about the impossibility of what she was witnessing. "Doctor," Clara said suddenly, "I keep thinking about something. Last week, when we had that group of wildlife biology students visit for their rotation, one of them mentioned something about bears and maternal behavior. Something about how mother bears can sometimes adopt," Dr. Kim finished. "Cross-species adoption in the wild. It's rare, but documented. But this isn't adoption. This is different. It's almost like—" Clara was interrupted by the sound of running footsteps in the hallway. David and Maria Chen burst through the doors, their faces pale with worry. "Where is she? Is Lily okay? What's the emergency?" Maria's voice was high with panic. Dr. Kim quickly stepped between them and the door to Lily's room. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I need you to stay calm. Lily is fine. Actually, she's better than fine. But there's something you need to see, and I need you to promise me you won't make any sudden movements or loud noises." David's face went white. "What kind of development requires us not to make noise? Is she dying?" "No," Dr. Kim said firmly. "She's actually stable for the first time since she was born, but the situation is unprecedented." Maria pushed past the doctor. "I want to see my daughter now." She made it 3 steps into the room before stopping dead in her tracks. The color drained from her face, and she grabbed David's arm so hard he winced. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, David, there's a bear." David looked over his wife's shoulder and his knees nearly gave out. "That's not possible. This is a hospital. How is there a bear in our daughter's room?" The bear had turned at the sound of their voices, studying the new arrivals with what seemed like careful assessment. For a moment, the room was frozen in tableau: the massive wild animal, the terrified parents, the medical staff caught between protocol and the inexplicable evidence before their eyes. Then something happened that none of them would ever forget. The bear made a sound, not a growl or a roar, but a soft, almost mournful call. And from somewhere in the distance, another sound answered. Clara felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Dr. Kim asked. "There's another one," Clara whispered. "There's another bear out there." The mother bear in the room became agitated for the first time, standing and moving toward the window. She pressed her massive paws against the glass and called out again, longer and more urgently this time. The answering call came again, closer now, and this time everyone heard it. But this call was different. Higher pitched, more desperate, younger. "That's a cub," David said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "I grew up in Alaska. That's definitely a bear cub calling." Maria's grip on her husband's arm tightened. "Are you saying there are more bears?" The mother bear was becoming increasingly distressed, pacing back and forth between the window and Lily's incubator. She would look out into the darkness, then back at the baby, as if torn between 2 powerful needs. Dr. Kim was already on her phone. "Security, this is Dr. Kim. We may have multiple animals on the property. I need a full perimeter sweep immediately." Jake Thompson's voice crackled over the radio. "Doctor, you're not going to believe this. I've got 3 more bears in the parking lot. A smaller female and what looks like 2 cubs. They're not approaching the building, but they're definitely agitated." The mother bear heard Jake's voice over the radio and let out a long, mournful howl that seemed to shake the very walls of the room. The sound was so full of anguish that Maria Chen began to cry. "She's calling to them. Maria whispered. "She's calling to her babies." As if understanding Maria's words, the bear turned from the window and walked back to Lily's incubator. She sat down again, but this time her posture was different. She looked directly at Maria and David, then at their tiny daughter, then back at them. Clara felt as though she was witnessing some kind of communication, something beyond human understanding, but unmistakably real. "I think," Clara said slowly, "I think she's trying to tell us something." The bear made another soft sound, almost like a question, and tilted her massive head toward the window where her family waited in the darkness. Dr. Martinez, the chief of staff, chose that moment to arrive with 2 animal control officers. The men were carrying tranquilizer guns and wearing protective gear, clearly prepared for a dangerous situation. "Nobody move," one of the officers commanded as he assessed the scene. "We're going to sedate the animal and remove it safely." "Wait," Dr. Kim said urgently. "Look at the patient's vitals first." The animal control officer, a man named Rick Stevens, who had been dealing with wildlife for 15 years, glanced at the monitors and did a double take. "What am I looking at here?" "A premature infant who has been critically unstable for 3 days and who has shown remarkable improvement only since this bear arrived," Dr. Kim explained. Rick had seen a lot of strange things in his career, but nothing like this. He studied the bear, noting its calm demeanor and protective positioning near the incubator. "In 15 years, I've never seen behavior like this," he admitted. "Usually, when bears enter human spaces, they're either looking for food or they're scared and defensive. This animal isn't exhibiting either behavior." The bear looked at Rick as if understanding his words, then made that same soft, questioning sound again. "It's almost like she's trying to communicate," Maria said through her tears. "Like she's trying to tell us something important." Dr. Martinez stepped forward, his years of medical experience warring with the impossible scene before him. "Even if we accept that this animal means no harm, we can't have wild bears in a hospital, the liability alone." His words were cut off by another series of calls from outside, the cub's voice, more desperate now. The mother bear stood again, clearly distressed by the sounds of her offspring in distress. Clara made a decision that would change everything. "What if we let her choose?" she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "What if we open the window and let her decide whether to stay with Lily or go to her cubs? Maybe then we'll understand what she's really trying to do." "Absolutely not," Dr. Martinez said immediately. "We're not opening any windows with wild animals around." But Rick Stevens was studying the bear with professional interest. "Actually," he said slowly, "that might not be the worst idea. If she wants to leave, she'll leave. If she stays, well, then we know something else is going on here." The debate might have continued, but Lily made the decision for them. The tiny baby, who had been sleeping peacefully throughout the entire ordeal, suddenly opened her eyes and began to cry. Not the weak, barely audible sound she had been making for days, but strong, healthy cries that filled the room. The mother bear immediately moved closer to the incubator, making her soothing, rumbling sounds. And incredibly, Lily's cries began to quiet. "She's responding to the bear," Maria whispered in amazement. "My daughter is responding to a wild bear like it's her mother." The bear looked at Maria when she spoke, and something passed between them. An understanding that transcended species, a recognition of the bond between mothers and their children, no matter how different those children might be. That's when Clara noticed something that made everything suddenly click into place. The bear had a distinctive marking on her left shoulder, a patch of lighter-colored fur in the shape of a crescent moon. Clara had seen that marking before, but where? Her mind raced through recent memories, trying to place the familiar pattern. Then it hit her like a thunderbolt. "Doctor, Kim," Clara said urgently, "I need you to pull up the emergency room records from 3 weeks ago. The car accident on Highway 9. Dr. Kim looked confused. "Clara, this isn't the time for—" "Please," Clara insisted. "The pregnant woman who was brought in after hitting something on the road, Maria Chen. I need to see that file." Maria's head snapped toward Clara. "How do you know about my accident?" "I never told anyone here about that." "Because I was working in emergency that night," Clara said, her voice growing more excited. "You were unconscious when they brought you in, bleeding heavily. You kept mumbling something about hitting an animal, about seeing a crescent moon shape in your headlights." The room fell silent, except for the soft beeping of Lily's monitors and the gentle rumbling sounds the bear continued to make. David's face went pale. "Maria, you said you couldn't remember what you hit. You said it was all a blur." "It was," Maria whispered. "But now that she mentions it, there was something large and dark, and then this flash of lighter color, like a marking or—" She stopped, staring at the bear's distinctive shoulder patch. Dr. Kim was already pulling up files on her tablet. "Here it is, Maria Chen, admitted October 15th, 2:30 a.m. Vehicular collision with unknown animal on Highway 9. Patient presented with severe abdominal trauma, possible placental abruption." "That's when Lily's problems started," David said slowly. "The doctors said the trauma from the accident caused her premature labor." Rick Stevens, the animal control officer, had been listening intently. "Highway 9 runs right through prime bear territory. October is when mothers are teaching their cubs to forage before winter hibernation." The bear had been watching this exchange with what seemed like growing understanding. When Rick mentioned cubs, she turned toward the window again and made that mournful calling sound. The answer from outside came immediately. Multiple cubs now, their voices carrying notes of distress and confusion. "How many cubs are out there?" Dr. Martinez asked Jake over the radio. "I count 4, sir. They're huddled together near the emergency entrance, and they keep looking up at the NICU windows. The adult bears with them are keeping them back, but they're all clearly agitated." 4 cubs. Clara felt pieces of a puzzle falling into place, but the picture they were forming seemed impossible. "Dr. Kim," Clara said carefully, "what time was Maria's accident?" "According to the ambulance report, approximately 1:45 a.m. "And what time did the Forest Service get the call about injured wildlife on Highway 9? Dr. Kim looked puzzled. "I wouldn't have that information." "Why would—" "Because I do," Rick Stevens said, quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "I was on duty that night. We got a call at 2:15 a.m. about a bear and cubs found injured near the roadside. A mother bear with 4 cubs. One of the cubs was critically injured, 2 had minor injuries, and one was—" He paused. "One was missing." The silence in the room was deafening. "Missing?" Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "We searched for 3 days," Rick continued. "Never found the 4th cub. The mother was beside herself. Wouldn't leave the area, kept calling and searching. We finally had to relocate her and the other 3 cubs to a sanctuary 40 miles north when she started getting aggressive with search teams." The bear had been listening to this conversation with obvious attention. When Rick finished speaking, she stood and walked to the window, pressing her massive paws against the glass. Her call this time was different, not mournful, but urgent, almost excited. The response from outside was immediate and overwhelming. Multiple voices calling back, a cacophony of bear sounds that seemed to shake the building. "They recognize her," Rick said in amazement. "After 3 weeks, they recognize her voice." "But how did she end up here?" Dr. Martinez asked. "And why is she so focused on our patient?" Clara was staring at the bear, at Maria, at tiny Lily in her incubator. The impossible idea that had been forming in her mind was becoming clearer, more real, more undeniable. "Maria," Clara said slowly, "when you were brought in that night, you were covered in blood. But not all of it was yours." Maria's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" The emergency team commented on it. "There was animal blood mixed with yours, a lot of it. They assumed it was from whatever you hit, but—" Clara paused, her voice growing stronger as the pieces came together. "What if it wasn't just from hitting an animal? What if you tried to help?" "I don't remember," Maria said, but her voice was uncertain. David was studying his wife's face. "Maria, you've been having dreams since the accident. You wake up crying, saying something about leaving someone behind." "Dreams?" Dr. Kim asked. "She keeps saying she can hear crying," David continued. "She wakes up in the middle of the night convinced she left someone who needed help." The bear had been watching Maria throughout this conversation. Now she moved away from the window and approached Maria directly, stopping just a few feet away. The massive animal sat down and looked directly into Maria's eyes. "Oh my God," Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I remember." Everyone in the room held their breath. "I hit her," Maria said, her voice breaking. "I hit this bear, and she went down. But then I heard crying, not human crying, but babies crying, animal babies. I got out of the car, even though I was hurt. There was so much blood, mine and hers, and these tiny cubs scattered on the road." The bear made a soft sound, almost like encouragement. One of them was badly hurt, barely moving. 2 others were crying but seemed okay, but there was a 4th one, so small, and it wasn't moving at all. I thought it was dead." Maria was sobbing now, the suppressed memory flooding back. But then it made this tiny sound like a whisper. It was alive, but barely. I picked it up, and it was so small, so fragile. I held it against my chest, trying to warm it up, and that's when I started bleeding worse. The baby, the cub, it was making these little sounds like it was trying to tell me something. Rick Stevens was documenting everything Maria said, his professional skepticism warring with the extraordinary nature of her account. "What happened next?" Clara asked gently. "I don't know. I remember holding this tiny life against my chest, feeling its heartbeat, and then nothing. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, and they told me Lily had been born prematurely because of my injuries." The bear stood and moved back to Lily's incubator. She placed one massive paw as close to the glass as possible without touching it, and made the softest sound any of them had heard from her yet. "The blood?" Clara said, understanding flooding her voice. "Maria, when you held that injured cub against your chest, your blood and its blood mixed. And then, when Lily was born 3 days later, she would have carried traces of that scent." Rick finished, his voice filled with awe. "Bears have an incredible sense of smell. If this mother bear lost a cub that night, and if that cub's scent somehow became associated with Maria's blood, she would have been able to track it," Dr. Kim said, "even 3 weeks later, even to a human baby who carried traces of that scent." The mother bear looked at each of them in turn, as if confirming their understanding. Then she turned back to Lily and resumed her gentle humming. "But that's impossible," Dr. Martinez protested. "You're suggesting this animal tracked a scent for 3 weeks, found its way to a hospital, and somehow connected a human baby to her lost cub?" "Bears can track scents for miles," Rick said, "and maternal instinct in the wild. It's more powerful than anything we fully understand." Jake Thompson's voice crackled over the radio again. "Doctors, you need to see this. The bears outside, they're not just standing there anymore. They're arranged in what looks like, well, it looks like a formation, like they're waiting for something." Dr. Kim moved to the window and looked down at the parking lot. What she saw made her gasp. "There are more than 4 cubs down there," she announced. "I count at least 8 bears total. They're all facing the building and they're all completely still. It's like they're holding vigil." The mother bear heard Dr. Kim's words and stood again. This time, when she called out, her voice carried a different tone. Not distress or longing, but something that sounded almost like decision. "She's made up her mind about something," Rick said. "I've seen that behavior before, right before a bear makes a major move." "What kind of move?" Maria asked fearfully. Before Rick could answer, something happened that changed everything once again. Lily, who had been sleeping peacefully throughout this entire revelation, suddenly opened her eyes wide and looked directly at the bear. For a moment that felt suspended in time, the tiny human baby and the massive wild animal stared at each other. Then Lily did something she had never done before in her short life. She smiled. Not the reflexive facial movements that newborns sometimes make, but a real, unmistakable smile of recognition and contentment. The bear's response was immediate and overwhelming. She threw back her massive head and let out a sound that was part howl, part celebration, part pure joy. The sound echoed through the hospital corridors and was immediately answered by the chorus of voices from the parking lot. "They're singing," Maria whispered in amazement. "All of them. They're singing together." And they were. The mother bear in the NICU and her family outside had begun a complex call and response that filled the night air with wild music. Other patients in the hospital would later describe it as the most beautiful and haunting sound they had ever heard. But something else was happening too. As the bears sang, Lily's monitors showed readings that made the medical staff gasp. Her oxygen levels were now at 100%. Her heart rate was strong and steady. Brain activity that had been minimal was now showing normal patterns for a full-term baby. "This is medically impossible," Dr. Martinez said, staring at the readouts. "Maybe," Clara said softly. "Medical science doesn't have all the answers." The bear finished her song and looked around the room at all the humans who had witnessed this extraordinary moment. Then she did something none of them expected. She bowed. It was unmistakably a boo, her massive head lowering toward Lily's incubator in what could only be described as a gesture of respect and farewell. She's saying goodbye, Maria realized, fresh tears streaming down her face. The bear looked at Maria one more time, and Maria felt she understood what the animal was trying to communicate. "Thank you," Maria whispered. "Thank you for watching over her, for keeping her safe when I couldn't." The bear made one final soft sound, almost like an acknowledgement, and then moved toward the window. "Wait," Rick said suddenly. "There's something else. If she really did lose a cub that night, and if she's been caring for your daughter as a substitute, what happened to the cub you tried to save?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything they thought they understood about this situation. The bear paused at the window and looked back at them, her dark eyes holding secrets they were only beginning to comprehend. Outside, the singing of the other bears had changed again. Now it sounded like calling, urgent, excited calling that seemed to be directed not at the mother bear in the hospital, but at something else entirely. Jake Thompson's voice came over the radio again, but this time it was filled with wonder rather than concern. "Doctors, you're really not going to believe this. One of the cubs outside, it's not acting like the others. It's smaller and it's walking different, like it's been injured and healed wrong, and there's something else." "What?" Dr. Kim asked. It's got what looks like medical tape stuck to its fur. Old tape, like from bandages or medical equipment. The silence in the NICU was absolute. Clara was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. The fourth cub, the one you tried to save, Maria. It survived. The mother bear at the window was practically vibrating with excitement, pressing her face against the glass and calling urgently to the bears below. But if the cub survived, Dr. Martinez said slowly, then why has she been here with Lily? The answer came from an unexpected source. Lily herself made a sound, not crying, but a soft cooing that seemed to echo the rhythm of the bear's calls. Because, Maria said, understanding flooding her voice, she wasn't replacing her cub with Lily. She was protecting both of them. She knew her injured cub was safe with the other bears, but somehow she also knew that Lily needed her. Rick Stevens shook his head in amazement. In all my years working with wildlife, I've never seen anything like this. Cross-species maternal protection is rare enough, but this is something else entirely. The mother bear turned from the window and walked back to Lily's incubator one final time. She placed her massive head as close to the glass as possible and made the softest, most tender sound they had heard from her yet. Lily responded by turning her head toward the bear and making that cooing sound again. They're saying goodbye, Clara realized. But as the bear prepared to leave, Dr. Kim noticed something on the monitors that made her freeze. "Wait," she said urgently. "Look at Lily's brain scans." Everyone gathered around the monitoring equipment, staring at readouts that showed brain activity patterns unlike anything they had seen before. "What are we looking at?" David asked. "I'm not sure, Doctor," Kim admitted. "But these patterns, they're not normal for a premature infant. They're more complex, more developed. It's almost like what? Like her brain development has been accelerated somehow. As if the time she spent with the bear has stimulated neural pathways that normally wouldn't develop for months." The implications of what Dr. Kim was suggesting hung heavy in the room. "Are you saying," Maria asked carefully, "that this bear has somehow helped our daughter's brain develop faster?" "I'm saying that the scans show development that should be impossible for a baby born as prematurely as Lily was." The bear seemed to sense the conversation was about her. She looked at the monitors, then at Lily, then at Maria and David with an expression that seemed almost proud. "She knows," David said in wonder. "Somehow, she knows what she's done." The bear made one final sound, a gentle rumble that seemed to contain all the warmth and protection she had been offering their daughter. Then she moved toward the door. Rick Stevens stepped aside to let her pass, his tranquilizer gun forgotten. "I've never seen anything like this in my entire career," he murmured. As the bear reached the doorway, she turned back one last time. Her dark eyes met each of theirs in turn, as if memorizing their faces. When her gaze reached Maria, she held it for a long moment. Maria felt tears streaming down her face. "I'll never forget," she whispered. "I'll never forget what you've done for us." The bear nodded, actually nodded, and then walked out of the room. They could hear her massive footsteps echoing down the hallway, growing fainter as she made her way toward the exit. Outside, the calling of the other bears grew more excited, welcoming their matriarch back to the family. But just as they thought the extraordinary encounter was over, Jake Thompson's voice came over the radio one more time. "Doctors, something's happening out here. The bears aren't leaving. They're bringing something to the building." Dr. Kim rushed to the window, followed by everyone else. What they saw in the parking lot below defied all logic and reason. The mother bear had rejoined her family, but instead of leading them away into the forest, she was directing them in what could only be described as an organized effort. Two of the larger bears were carefully carrying something between them. something wrapped in what looked like large leaves and moss. "What are they carrying?" Maria asked, pressing her face against the glass. Rick Stevens pulled out a pair of binoculars from his equipment bag. After studying the scene for a long moment, his face went pale. "You're not going to believe this," he said slowly. "They're carrying medical supplies." "What?" Dr. Martinez demanded, grabbing the binoculars. "Bandages, IV tubes, even what looks like a stethoscope. All carefully wrapped in natural materials." Dr. Kim stared in disbelief. "That's impossible. How would wild bears get medical supplies?" Jake Thompson's voice came over the radio again, more urgent now. "Doctors, they're heading for the emergency entrance, and there's something else. I'm getting reports from other hospitals in the region. Apparently, there have been break-ins at medical facilities over the past 3 weeks. Nothing violent, nothing damaged, but medical supplies have been going missing." The implications hit everyone at the same time. "She's been preparing," Clara whispered. "For 3 weeks, she's been gathering medical supplies." "But why?" David asked. "And how could a wild animal possibly know what medical supplies are?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Kim's tablet chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at it and her eyes widened. "I just received a message from Dr. Rachel Morrison at Pine Valley Wildlife Rehabilitation Center," she announced. "She says they've been caring for an injured bear cub for 3 weeks, and the cub has been displaying highly unusual behavior." "What kind of behavior?" Rick asked. Dr. Kim read from the message. "The cub appears to have learned to recognize medical equipment and procedures. It's been observed trying to arrange bandages and medical supplies in specific patterns, and it becomes agitated when medical personnel don't follow certain procedures it seems to expect." The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. "The cub Maria tried to save," Clara said slowly. "It didn't just survive the accident. It learned from being treated by humans. And somehow," Rick added, "it's been communicating that knowledge to its family." Outside, the bears had reached the emergency entrance. The mother bear was making specific sounds, not the musical calls from before, but sharp, directional vocalizations that seemed to be giving instructions to the other bears. "She's organizing them," Maria observed, like a medical team. Jake Thompson appeared in the doorway of the NICU, slightly out of breath. "Doctors, you need to make a decision. These bears aren't acting aggressively, but they're clearly trying to bring those supplies inside. And there's something else. I just got off the phone with the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Dr. Morrison is on her way here with the injured cub." "The cub is coming here?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Apparently, it became extremely agitated about an hour ago. Started making distress calls and trying to escape the facility. Dr. Morrison thinks it somehow sensed its family was here." The mother bear's calls from outside had changed again. Now they sounded urgent, almost commanding. "She's calling for someone," Rick realized. "Not her family, someone else." As if in response to his words, a new sound echoed through the hospital corridors. Footsteps, human footsteps, but moving with an unusual gait, as if the person was injured or walking carefully. Everyone turned toward the sound, and what they saw made them question everything they thought they knew about the boundaries between human and animal intelligence. A young man, probably in his early 20s, was walking down the hallway. He was dressed in torn clothing and moved with a slight limp. His hair was unkempt, and there were healing scratches on his arms and face. But what was most striking was his behavior. He was making soft vocalizations that sounded remarkably similar to the bear calls they had been hearing all night. "Who is that?" Dr. Martinez demanded. The young man reached the NICU entrance and paused, looking directly at the group gathered around Lily's room. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't used it for human conversation in a long time. "My name is Thomas Blackwood," he said slowly. "I've been living in the forest for 3 weeks, and I think I know why these bears are here." Dr. Kim stepped forward. "Sir, this is a restricted area. You can't just—" "I was in the car with Maria Chen the night of the accident," Thomas interrupted, his words stopping everyone in their tracks. Maria gasped. "That's impossible. I was alone in my car." Thomas shook his head. "You weren't alone on the road. I was in the car behind you. I saw everything." The memory came flooding back to Maria like a dam bursting. "The headlights," she whispered. "There were headlights behind me. I remember thinking someone might stop to help, but when I woke up in the hospital—" "I never made it to the hospital," Thomas said. "After your car hit the Bear family, I stopped to help. But when I got out of my car, something happened that changed everything." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a complex pattern of healed bite marks and claw scratches. "One of the cubs, not the one you tried to save, but another one, it was trapped under debris from the collision. When I tried to free it, it bit me, deep. But instead of running away afterward, it stayed with me. It was like the bite created some kind of connection." Rick Stevens was documenting everything, his scientific training warring with the impossible nature of what he was hearing. "What kind of connection?" he asked. Thomas looked directly at him. "I started understanding them, not their sounds, their intentions, their emotions, their needs, and they started understanding me." "That's medically impossible," Dr. Martinez protested. "Is it?" Thomas challenged. "You have a premature baby whose brain development has been accelerated by contact with a wild bear. You have a mother bear who learned to recognize and gather medical supplies. You have a cub that can identify medical procedures. Maybe the impossible is more possible than we think." The mother bear's calls from outside had become more insistent, and now she was being answered by multiple voices, not just her family, but other sounds coming from different directions. "There are more coming," Jake Thompson announced over the radio. "I count at least 15 bears approaching from the forest. Different families, different ages, they're all converging on the hospital." "15?" Dr. Kim asked. "Why would multiple bear families come here?" Thomas limped closer to Lily's room, and as he did, the baby began making soft cooing sounds. "Because word travels fast in the forest," he said. "Animals communicate in ways we don't understand. When this mother bear discovered a way to help heal, to protect, to save lives, other mothers heard about it." "Are you saying," Clara asked carefully, "that other bears have injured or sick cubs?" "Not just cubs," Thomas replied. "There's an old male with the infected wound that won't heal, a pregnant female who's having complications, a family whose den was destroyed by logging equipment. They've all come here because somehow word spread that this place, this hospital, it's where miracles happen." The scope of what Thomas was suggesting hit everyone like a physical blow. "You're talking about wild animals seeking medical treatment," Dr. Martinez said. "That's beyond impossible. That's ... His words were cut off by a new sound from outside, the rumble of a vehicle engine. Through the window, they could see a van from Pine Valley Wildlife Rehabilitation Center pulling into the parking lot. "Dr. Morrison is here with the cub," Jake announced. But as the van stopped, something unexpected happened. Before Dr. Morrison could even get out of the vehicle, the back doors burst open and a small bear cub leaped out, landing gracefully on the asphalt. The cub was clearly the one Maria had tried to save. Smaller than the others, with a distinctive limp and visible scars. But what was most remarkable was what it was carrying in its mouth: a small medical bag. The mother bear's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. She let out a cry of pure joy and rushed toward her missing cub, the two of them meeting in the middle of the parking lot in a reunion that brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching. But the emotional reunion was brief. The cub quickly broke away from its mother and began making urgent sounds, gesturing with its head toward the hospital building. It set down the medical bag and began pawing at its contents, pulling out items and arranging them in a specific pattern. It's trying to show them something, Maria realized. It's teaching them. Dr. Rachel Morrison had finally emerged from her van, and she was staring at the scene before her with the expression of someone whose worldview was being fundamentally challenged. Jake Thompson escorted her up to the NICU, where she joined the growing crowd of witnesses to the impossible. "Dr. Morrison," Dr. Kim said urgently, "we need to know everything about that cub's behavior during its recovery." Dr. Morrison, a woman in her 50s who had spent her entire career working with wildlife, looked like she was struggling to find words. "In 25 years of wildlife rehabilitation," she began slowly, "I have never seen anything like what that cub demonstrated. It learned to recognize medical instruments within days. It would become agitated if medications weren't administered at the correct times. It even learned to indicate when its own pain levels changed." "But how is that possible?" Dr. Martinez asked. "I don't know, Doctor," Morrison admitted. "But there's more. The cub began displaying what I can only describe as teaching behavior. It would take medical supplies and arrange them, then make specific vocalizations, as if it was trying to explain procedures to an invisible audience." Thomas nodded. It was communicating with its family. Bears have ways of sharing information across distances that humans don't fully understand. This cub was teaching its mother and siblings everything it learned about human medical care. Outside, the cub had finished arranging the medical supplies and was now making a series of complex vocalizations. The other bears gathered around, listening intently, occasionally responding with their own sounds. "It's like a medical lecture," Clara observed in amazement. "More than that," Thomas said. "It's like a strategy session. They're planning something." As if to confirm his words, the bears suddenly organized into groups. Some remained with the medical supplies, while others spread out around the hospital perimeter. The mother bear and her cub approached the emergency entrance together. "They want to come in," Rick realized. "Not just the mother this time. They want to bring the whole operation inside." Dr. Martinez was pacing now, the weight of the decision clearly overwhelming him. "I can't authorize this. The liability, the safety concerns, the complete impossibility of what's being suggested." "But sir," Clara interrupted, "look at Lily's readings. They're still improving. Whatever this connection is between these animals and our patients, it's having positive medical effects." Jake Thompson's voice came over the radio again, more urgent than before. "Doctors, I'm getting reports from the emergency department. We have 3 more ambulances en route with injured patients. Car accident on Highway 9, the same stretch where Mrs. Chen had her accident." The timing was too coincidental to ignore. "How many patients?" Dr. Kim asked. 5 total, 2 adults, 3 children, all critical." The mother bear and her cub had heard Jake's announcement through the hospital's external speakers. The 2 animals looked at each other, then toward the building, and began making urgent sounds. "They know," Thomas said with certainty. "They know injured people are coming, and they want to help." Dr. Morrison stepped forward. "Dr. Martinez, I know this is unprecedented, but we're witnessing something that challenges everything we think we know about animal intelligence and interspecies cooperation. If there's even a chance that these animals can provide some kind of beneficial effect, the liability alone could shut down this hospital, Dr. Martinez replied. And if we turn them away, Maria said quietly, and those injured people die, what's the liability then? The sound of sirens in the distance was growing louder. The first ambulance would arrive within minutes. The mother bear seemed to sense the urgency. She approached the emergency entrance and did something that stunned everyone watching. She stood up on her hind legs and pressed one massive paw against the automatic door button. The doors slid open. For a moment, bear and humans stared at each other across the threshold between wild nature and human civilization. Then the mother bear stepped inside the hospital, her cub following close behind, carrying the medical bag in its mouth. Code Blue to emergency, came the announcement over the hospital speakers. Multiple trauma patients, ETA 2 minutes. The mother bear's head turned toward the sound of the announcement, and she began moving purposefully down the corridor toward the emergency department. She's going to help, Thomas said, and there was no doubt in his voice. Dr. Martinez made a decision that would either save lives or end his career. Jake, clear the emergency department of all non-essential personnel. Dr. Kim, I want you documenting everything. Rick, you stay close to the animals but don't interfere unless they pose a direct threat. What about the other bears outside? Clara asked. As if in answer to her question, the sound of more automatic doors opening echoed through the hospital. The other bears were entering through different entrances, spreading throughout the building with what appeared to be coordinated purpose. They're taking positions, Rick observed. Like they're preparing for multiple patients. The first ambulance arrived, its sirens wailing. Through the emergency department's glass doors, they could see paramedics rushing to unload a stretcher carrying a small child. The mother bear and her cub had reached the emergency department and positioned themselves near the trauma bay. As the paramedics burst through the doors with their patient, they stopped dead in their tracks at the sight of the massive wild animals. "What the hell?" one of them started to say. But before anyone could react, something extraordinary happened. The small cub approached the injured child on the stretcher and began making soft, rhythmic sounds, the same soothing rumbles its mother had used with baby Lily. The child, who had been crying weakly from pain, suddenly quieted. And on the monitors tracking the child's vital signs, the numbers began to stabilize. "Get a medical team down here now," Dr. Martinez commanded over the intercom. "And somebody get me the hospital's lawyers on the phone, because we're about to make medical history." But as the second ambulance arrived, followed quickly by the third, it became clear that they were about to face challenges that no amount of medical training or legal preparation could have prepared them for. Because outside, more bears were arriving. Not just families now, but what appeared to be representatives from multiple species. Wolves, deer, even what looked like a mountain lion, all gathered at the edge of the parking lot, watching and waiting. Word had spread throughout the entire forest ecosystem that Pine Valley Medical Center had become something unprecedented, a place where the boundaries between human and animal, between civilization and wilderness, between possible and impossible no longer applied. And as Thomas Blackwood looked out at the growing assembly of wildlife, he realized that what they had witnessed tonight was just the beginning of something that would change the world's understanding of intelligence, communication, and healing forever. "Dr. Martinez," he said quietly, "I think we're going to need a bigger hospital." As the night wore on, Pine Valley Medical Center transformed into something the world had never seen before. The emergency department became a symphony of human medical expertise and animal intuition working in perfect harmony. Each injured patient from the highway accident was attended by both human medical teams and bear companions, whose presence seemed to accelerate healing in ways that defied medical explanation. Clara stood in the NICU, watching baby Lily sleep peacefully in her incubator. The little girl's vital signs were now completely normal, stronger than most full-term babies. The mother bear had returned one final time to check on her, gently touching the glass with her massive paw before rejoining her family in the emergency department. "She's going to be okay," Maria whispered, tears of gratitude streaming down her face as she held David's hand. "Our little miracle baby is going to be more than okay." Dr. Kim was documenting everything, her scientific mind still struggling to process what she had witnessed. "The neural development patterns are unlike anything in medical literature," she told Dr. Martinez. "It's as if the bear's presence triggered evolutionary leaps in brain function." In the emergency department, the last of the accident victims was being stabilized. A young boy who had arrived barely clinging to life was now sitting up, laughing softly as one of the bear cubs nuzzled his hand. The child's mother wept with relief, as doctors confirmed that his internal injuries were healing at an impossible rate. Thomas Blackwood moved through the hospital like a bridge between two worlds, translating the bear's intentions to the medical staff and helping coordinate their efforts. His connection to the animals had grown stronger throughout the night, and he could sense their deep satisfaction at being able to help heal rather than simply survive. "They understand," he told Dr. Morrison as they watched the bears carefully positioning themselves around patients. "They understand that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about presence, about connection, about refusing to let someone face their darkest moment alone." Rick Stevens had given up trying to explain what he was documenting in his wildlife report. Instead, he simply watched in awe as the bears demonstrated levels of empathy and intelligence that challenged every assumption about the animal kingdom. As dawn began to break over Pine Valley, the bears began their quiet departure. One by one, the families gathered their cubs and made their way back toward the forest. But they didn't leave empty-handed. Each family carried medical supplies that Dr. Martinez had officially donated to their cause, understanding that this night had established a new kind of partnership between human and animal communities. The mother bear, who had started it all, made one final round through the hospital. She visited each patient they had helped, each child whose fever had broken under her gentle presence, each adult whose pain had eased through her calming influence. At each bedside, she left behind a small gift, a perfectly shaped stone, a beautifully curved piece of wood, a cluster of medicinal herbs that even the doctors recognized as therapeutically valuable. When she reached baby Lily's room for the last time, she did something that would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. She placed one massive paw against her own chest, then gestured toward the sleeping baby, and finally pressed that same paw against the glass of the incubator. "She's giving Lily her protection," Maria realized through her tears. "Even when she's gone, part of her will always be watching over our daughter." The bear looked at Maria and David with those intelligent, compassionate eyes one final time. Then she bowed her great head in a gesture of respect and farewell before walking slowly out of the NICU. Thomas followed the bears to the edge of the hospital property, where the entire extended family had gathered. As the sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the bear families began their journey back into the forest. But this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. "They'll be back," Thomas told the small group of hospital staff who had gathered to watch the departure. "Not just when there are emergencies, but to check on the patients they've helped, to see how the children are growing, to bring herbs and medicines from the forest. They've adopted this hospital, and everyone in it." Dr. Martinez nodded, understanding that his small medical center had become something unprecedented. A bridge between human civilization and the natural world, a place where healing transcended the boundaries of species. Clara returned to the NICU to find Lily awake and alert, her tiny eyes bright and focused in a way they had never been before. As Clara approached the incubator, the baby turned toward her and smiled. Not just any smile, but the expression of such pure joy and contentment that it took Clara's breath away. "Welcome to the world, little miracle," Clara whispered. "You have quite a story to tell." In the distance, the calls of the bear families echoed through the forest, not cries of wildness or danger, but songs of connection and hope. Other animals answered their calls, and soon the entire forest was alive with a symphony of voices celebrating the night when boundaries had been crossed and hearts had been opened. Pine Valley Medical Center had been forever changed. In the weeks that followed, the story would spread around the world, inspiring new research into animal intelligence, interspecies communication, and the healing power of compassion that knows no boundaries. But for those who had witnessed it firsthand, the true miracle wasn't in the medical breakthroughs or scientific discoveries that would follow. The true miracle was in the moment when a mother bear had refused to leave a human baby's side, teaching them all that love, protection, and the desire to heal transcend every difference between species. Baby Lily Chen would grow up knowing that she had been protected not just by human medicine, but by the fierce love of a mother bear who had recognized in her a kindred spirit worth saving. And somewhere in the forest beyond Pine Valley, a family of bears would continue their own journey, carrying with them the knowledge that healing and hope could be found in the most unexpected places. The mother bear had kept her vigil. She had protected what was precious. And in doing so, she had opened a door between worlds that would never again be closed. As Clara finished her shift that morning, she looked out the window toward the forest one last time. For just a moment, she thought she saw a familiar silhouette among the trees, a massive bear standing watch over the hospital, ensuring that all was well with the tiny life she had helped to save. And in that moment, Clara understood that some connections transcend understanding, some love knows no boundaries, and some miracles are born not from science or medicine, but from the simple, profound recognition that all life is precious. All hearts are capable of love, and all mothers, human or otherwise, will move mountains to protect those they hold dear. The story of the mother bear who refused to leave the baby's incubator side would be told and retold for generations. But for little Lily Chen, sleeping peacefully in her incubator with the strongest vital signs the hospital had ever recorded, it wasn't a story at all. It was simply the beginning of a life touched by magic, protected by love, and blessed with the knowledge that in this vast, sometimes frightening world, there would always be guardians watching over her. Some human, some wild, but all united by the unbreakable bonds of care and compassion that make life worth living. And in the forest beyond Pine Valley, a mother bear settled down with her reunited family, knowing that her vigil was complete, her purpose fulfilled, and her legacy secured in the tiny human life that would forever carry a piece of her protective spirit. The circle was complete. The healing was done. And love had proven, once again, that it truly knows no boundaries.